So we're here at the IAC 2024 in Milan, and joining me is a special guest, Drew Feustel, who is a former NASA astronaut and is now an astronaut advisor at VAST.
Yep.
Now, you may or may not have heard of VAST. For me, I feel like they've just come out of nowhere.
We really have, but we've been in business since 2021 when the company was founded by Jed McCaleb. And we are working to build the world's first commercial private space station on orbit, low Earth orbit destinations.
I mean, that's a pretty bold ambition, but it actually goes even further than that. You're not just doing the first commercial station, you're also trying to have artificial gravity, is that right?
We are. That is one of the long-term visions of the company. We've recognized that in the near term, the needs of the community, the space community, and of course government agencies are for an orbital platform, a microgravity platform. So that's what we're working towards right now. In the long term, though, the vision is that for deep space exploration, humans will need to have a way to combat the effects of microgravity on the human body, and one of those ways is artificial gravity stations. So I'd say that's a long-term plan and vision. It's driving a lot of what we're doing right now, but we may get there. We need to achieve the first few hurdles first, and then we'll see where we end up.
So you started out in 2021. How long and from starting to be a company until getting something into space, do you think?
Well, our plan is to launch the first orbital module, which is Haven 1. I think you have some familiarity with that. It's a small module, about 4 or 5 times the habitable volume of a SpaceX Dragon capsule. It will be its own free flyer in space, but a destination for a SpaceX Dragon capsule. We hope to launch that at the end of 2025. That's the timeline right now. We have our own in-house manufacturing, design, engineering, manufacturing facility. So I think we've got a good shot at it. We're building primary structure right now. Every time I show up out at the facility in Long Beach, California, I see new components welded together, primary structure. The panels and materials that we need for our flight unit are actually in-house now, and we'll start working on those, the machine work on those in the near term.
And so we know that the International Space Station is getting closer to the end of its life. Maybe it's going to, will end operations there around 2030, it seems. And I know NASA is already looking at companies that could, produce the next space station.
Right.
Now, when the Space Shuttle program ended, there was a big gap between that and the SpaceX Dragon being able to take Americans back into space from American soil. Do you think there's a risk of there being a gap between having an ISS and a commercial platform?
Well, there could be, and it depends on how the plans come together by the various competing companies that want to become the successor to ISS. We are one of those companies. There are, I believe, 4 of us in competition for that contract to replace ISS. We're taking a phased approach to put an orbital module in space first to prove technology, capability. Our intentions, stand up our operations team. We're launching a Haven 1 demo satellite, which has all of our critical avionics, propulsion, software, all critical components that will then be transferred to Haven 1 and allow that spacecraft to fly. So by the time we get to bidding on the contract for the commercial LEO destination award, which is basically the successor to ISS, we will have flown a satellite and an orbital module and operated that and sent humans to it. So we're hoping that that phased approach, that stepwise pragmatic approach to proving our capability and our manufacturing skills will allow us to be competitive to win that award.
And I mean, currently NASA has put forward some funding for, I think it's 3 companies, but
we are not one of those 3 companies.
You're not one of those 3 companies. So you'll be applying for the next phase of that CLD funding, but how on earth are you doing all this? How in space are you going to do all this without the NASA funding?
Yeah, so thanks to our founder, Jed McCaleb. He is providing funding for the company through the first crewed launch or visit to Haven 1. And so at that time, we will be working between now and then, of course, to attract investors and individuals that would like to continue to support the work that we're doing in pursuit of that CLD contract award. But certainly, if we show up and have a vehicle in space that is visited by sovereign nation astronauts and private individuals, we stand a very good chance of creating opportunities for the future. And I think we'll be well positioned to go after that next phase, which is the successor to ISS with bigger modules, greater capability, and then who knows what's going to happen next, right? It's all changing very rapidly. Yeah.
So Haven 1 is a single module station. Yep. When you bid for that second phase of NASA funding, you've got it even more ambitious.
A little more complex, but we are relying on existing launch architecture that is here now in the present. Some of the companies are relying on Starship capabilities to launch some of their components. We will launch our Haven 1 module on a Falcon 9 rocket, and we will visit that vehicle with a SpaceX Dragon crew vehicle. For the CLD, or the proposal that we'll have for ISS, it's a stretched version, so we'll stretch out our current module that we're designing and building by about 5 meters, launching on a Falcon Heavy with an extended fairing. So it's a fairly straightforward approach. All of the eclipse, power, thermal, propulsion, all those systems that exist on not only our demo flight, but will exist on Haven 1, those will be then transferred also to the Haven 2 project. So we don't have to reinvent anything to get there. We don't have to wait for Starship to launch. We don't have to wait for technologies to exist. We don't have to build or reinvent a closed loop ecosystem. We will rely on what we have right now to achieve our objectives in the near term, still provide that capability of visiting an orbital platform, and then we can mature that in phases and just take a stepwise approach to becoming better and better.
So just behind us we have the architecture. So that's a 9-module station.
That is. So the first version would be 4 of those wheel spoke modules, and those are, if you look at that, those individual modules are a stretch version of the Haven 1 with an additional docking port on the end. So for a module like that, you could have a crew vehicle on one side and a cargo ship on the other if needed. With Haven 1, there's only one docking port. So when it launches, it has all its consumables to support 160 crewed days or 4 10-day missions by a crew of 4 over its 3-year life. So with these modules, a little larger, more launch payload capability internal to the structure, and also two docking ports, so that we can not only attach them together to make it longer and create more volume, but also to have cargo ships and crew vehicles coming at the same time.
And is that one designed to be a proper space station in the sense that it will be continuously have humans aboard?
There's flexibility in that option. We can do both what we call crew tended or visiting crew for short durations, but also it has enough capability to support longer duration missions. That's with the addition of the port. We could fly cargo ships up if we had crew remain there the entire time. Of course, with any of these vehicles, there'll always be a SpaceX Dragon docked to the vehicle because that's the crew's lifeboat and safe way home. So they'll both have that capability. But yeah, you could. The point is, we have options, and we're creating flexibility in the architecture so that we're not relying on one plan. Because if that plan doesn't work out, and that single approach doesn't work out, we have no way to flex, right? So this is our way of building a very stepwise, reasonable, thought-out approach with flexibility and options. We want to create options for all the users.
So the docking, will that be like the standard docking port that's on the International Space Station?
Yeah.
So it could also take Starliner, for example?
Potentially. I think there's some modifications. I don't know what the actual docking port, but it's basically an international docking adapter port. I believe what we're building to right now, which was provided to us by SpaceX because that's how their vehicle is configured, is similar to the design architecture of what's going to be used on Gateway. But it is basically an international docking adapter. I think it's an 800 millimeter port. Yeah.
And when you've got this more complex setup, will you be able to rotate for the artificial gravity?
So Haven 1 will actually probably spin during its 3-year lifespan when we don't have humans on it, just so that we can understand what are the dynamics of that, what's required of the control system, what's required of the maintenance of the orbit. Haven 2 also, because it's a long structure, ultimately our spinning station is like a spinning stick that sort of tumbles end over end. depending on how Haven 2 is utilized, if we have visiting crew and international sovereign nation users of the spacecraft, if they don't have an interest in spinning their astronauts, we won't do it, but there may be untended phases where we have the capability and we could spin it just to understand those dynamics better as well. So we'll want to further investigate what those requirements and challenges will be. I don't think we fully understand all of those. Also, even from a human perspective, many of us who have flown in space have experienced spinning spacecraft before, and there are some challenges associated with that. So we want to make sure we really have a good handle on what that's going to mean for astronauts.
How do you know, like how fast it would have to spin to give you the kind of like Earth gravity? Or?
I think the model is something like 2 to 3 revolutions per minute, so it's a fairly high rate. And you can think about some of the dynamics of floating inside a volume that is maybe potentially spinning around you, or where your feet are planted. A lot of details to work out. That's really why we've kind of moved that to the longer term plan. We want to recognize the user needs now, and so that's what we're going after, which is orbital platform in the interim, showing our capability and our credibility, and then building that next phase, which is the Haven 2 to compete for the CLD.
And who will be the first crew?
Great question. We do not have the crew selected yet, nor have we finalized any agreements, but we're getting a lot of interest, both for primarily for Haven 1, and we are excited to see who's going to be the first crew member or nation to open the hatch on the very first private space station ever to orbit
So it
the
wouldn't
planet.
necessarily be a test crew?
Not necessarily. No. I really don't know. You know, there's certain business case to all of this as well that needs to make sense for the company as to how we sell those seats and how we create that infrastructure and that economy that allows us to continue and make this. I mean, ultimately, you want a company to survive based on their planning and their profit models, and so we intend to do the same thing.
How do you feel about the lunar economy, or lunar or LEO economy? Because at this conference, we've heard a lot of talk about commercial actors coming in and all these huge, great opportunities. Do you think that there actually really, truly is a business case for LEO?
I think there has to be. I spent 23 years with NASA. I understand the challenges that we face every year with budgets. I understand. I've watched how NASA has to pivot every time there's a new large program that comes along because we are limited in budget, but also with personnel and workforce that can manage those things. So it's really important that we create a way for private industry to start contributing and participating more in that economy. I mean, certainly we've had contractors, you know, for decades. As long as there's been space programs, there has been contractors and companies that support that sector. But the government has always really borne much of the financial burden to make that happen. So as we see investments by private companies and capability, you know, NASA, as we've all witnessed, has turned to a service provider, you know, contract agreements as opposed to just subcontracting and owning everything. They're asking for service providers to provide assets that NASA can basically lease or borrow or rent. And that's the model we need to move into so that government can continue to explore the next phase and reach out to the next boundary and push the limits of human spaceflight.
How many people could you put on Haven 2? I'm just wondering if you have, say, a national crew from NASA using the platform, and then maybe you have some rich people who want to go on holiday in space.
Yeah.
Like, is there like how do you deal with the crew dynamics of different teams?
Well, we could easily have a mixed crew. I mean, spaceflight is challenging, and there will always be a need for vetting crew members and making sure that we send competent, credible individuals to space that aren't going to potentially. Really, it's about protecting the assets in space and that spacecraft. So there will always be a need to do that and understand who it is we're working with on orbit. But also the crew size and the total crew complement will be limited by the number of docking ports that we have. And with Haven 2 in the stick configuration, because you connect them together, there's only 2. So the most you would have on that stick figure configuration is 8 crew members, because you'd have 4 on one side and 4 on the other. When we go to the larger structure, the spoke wheel, there's now potentially 4 docking compartments, if you include some of the docking compartments around the core structure, then that would create some additional opportunities as well. So hard to say what the crew size would be, but that's always going to be limited by your docking ports and your escape vehicles.
But primarily you're going for kind of professional astronauts, commercial researchers, or
yeah, no. Well, no, we
we
believe that the opportunity exists for both populations of astronauts. There are so many sovereign nations that are really motivated and interested to stand up a human spaceflight program of their own, and this is an access that didn't exist previously. So we want to enable that capability. So we see primary tenets being sovereign nation governments that are agencies that want to put people in space for research and exploration. We also believe that private individuals can go to space for many of the same reasons. If you look at the complements of the first 3 private astronaut missions that have flown, and in particular the first one, because the second and the third were primarily sovereign nations. We had the UAE, we had Saudi Arabia, Turkey, a couple of different nations represented there, Italians. They all went to do science. Even the first crew, who was 1 professional astronaut and 3 private individuals, their objective was to do science and research and work in space, not just to look out the window. And that's a beautiful thing to do, but it is really not serving the best interests of themselves, the people that are supporting them, the people that are providing funding for them to do that. So we believe it's still a research platform. That's what we're building in space, something that has the capability to do science, research, technology development. So we'll always continue to push that as our primary objective.
I assume you do have some nice windows.
We have 1 really big window on Haven 1. Haven 2 will have multiple windows and probably a cupola as well. I mean, we're designing in a cupola for it. So yeah, windows are really important. Astronauts don't go to space without windows, ever.
What about an airlock? Will they be able to
Haven
support
2 would have an
EVAs?
airlock. If you look at that module, that center section, which would be a Starship launch derivative, there's an airlock built into that architecture. So ultimately, we want to have EVA spacewalking capability built into the system as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So do you have your ticket?
I do not have a ticket. We take very unique and specific circumstances for me to fly in space as a representative of VAST, but I would say it's not a non-zero probability, but it is a near zero probability, and that's okay. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they give you a ticket and you
I'm not going to say no. You wouldn't say no
that's a
either,
shame.
would you?
I was going to hope that you didn't want to go. You could give it to
Oh
me.
yeah, okay. Well,
If you get to the point where you need an extra
we can do a lottery.
researcher,
I mean, yeah. If it gets to that point, we'll put tickets in a bucket and see who pulls out the straw. Yeah.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Kate.
I really appreciate it.
Yep,
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. Thank you.